in this commission that caused all four councils to be together today.
Well, I'm hoping that the fact that Mr. Hanneman has asked his leave, you're not going to interpret that as a walkout.
Very pressing duties elsewhere.
Thanks for those comments, Mr. Pieters.
Yes.
And Mr. Hanneman, your excuse.
Now, Mr. Chairman, I have submitted a written copy of my submissions. I'm not sure if you have a copy of it.
Yes, I have a copy, electronic copy of it, yes.
Now, Commissioner Slowe, these submissions, the objectives are to put before the Commission relevant facts and arguments to assist you in your task pursuant to the terms of reference, and to point out errors and omissions in various witnesses' testimony, and to persuade you that the evidence viewed fairly and objectively illustrate that the staff of the Guyana Police Force who were investigating the reported plot on the life of His Excellency on March 29, 2017 and thereafter did not act in compliance with standard operating procedures of the Guyana Police Force and did not exercise due diligence. To persuade you that the evidence viewed fairly and objectively supports a finding of negligence, abandonment of duty, discreditable conduct, deceit, disregard of instructions, and inaction on the part of named members of the Guyana Police Force, including Sila Passad, and to submit recommendations to improve the efficiency of the Guyana Police Force. We will also make submissions on what acts and omissions constitute various offenses under the various legislations that you have carried pursuant to your mandate. And we will also make some submissions in respect to systemic issues that flow from this case. Now, Mr. Chairman, obviously, you have a very difficult task, a task that none of us in this room have, because you have to determine the credibility and the reliability of the evidence that you've heard. And it's important because obviously you have a former Chief Justice that appeared before you, but you also had a Chancellor who appeared, a Chancellor of Judiciary who appeared before you as a witness, and she said something very important, which adds a certain solemnity and gravity to your mandate. She said, look, in this case, all I had was paper before me. I didn't get to see or hear the witnesses. And so the demeanor of the witnesses that appeared before you are important to your assessment, how they conducted themselves in the witness box, whether what they said had a ring of truth, and all the other salient ingredients that come into play when you're assessing the credibility of a witness. And I've dealt with some of it in my written submissions. Now, Mr. Chairman, I represent Mr. Chase, and Mr. Chase was acting in a professional capacity as a reporter when he did that interview with Andrew Gillard. And what is important for your purpose is that's the only video recorded interview you have in respect to this investigation. And this is 2017, where the tools available to record statements by the police are numerous, including cell phones. So there's no reason why interviews cannot be video recorded, and we will deal with that. Mr. Chase appeared before you, and his statement was read into the record, and he was cross-examined by the retired Chief Justice, Mr. Chang, and Mr. Ram as well, and re-examined by me. Mr. Justice Chang seems to want to urge in you that you should disbelieve Mr. Chase, or you should attach some motive to Mr. Chase simply because Mr. Chase had a 2010 guilty plea or conviction. I'm not sure even if simple larceny is a conviction. It's a finding of guilt. But whether or not it's a conviction in my jurisdiction, it wouldn't be a conviction for the purpose of the Criminal Records Act or any other legislation. So I'm not sure in this jurisdiction whether it's considered a criminal record, but the commission may want to check on that. But Mr. Justice Chang is saying that you should ascribe some adverse credibility in Mr. Travis Chase for that reason, and that Mr. Chase had an axe to grind with the police and any number of things. And we say to you that you cannot possibly attach any significance to what Mr. Chang has told you to Mr. Chase, either providing the video evidence to the police or publicly broadcasting it. We say that you cannot ascribe those motives that Mr. Travis Chase wanted to get back at the police. That's why he aired the video, or that he was a perfect dupe for Mr. Gillard. You cannot ascribe that to Mr. Chase. Otherwise, you open a floodgate that because someone may have pled guilty to an offense, nothing that they say should be believed, and an offense that has no relevance to the matter at issue, and an offense that's dated. So we say in this case that to describe Mr. Chase as the perfect victim of a dupe is simplistic in this case, and that he aided and abetted Gillard. No such evidence exists. What evidence exists before you is that Mr. Chase did what a prudent and a competent reporter would do. He sat him down, he videotaped the interview, he recognized the importance of the import of the interview, he contacted the political directorate, he contacted the police, and he sought legal advice. The fact that he, Justice Chang says, well, he embellished the story because the president was not doing any outreach. Of course, the president was doing outreach. The president had come from a very lengthy period that intensified in 2014 that led up to the election, a lot of public meetings and a lot of public gatherings. The president did not stop that when he got elected. As a matter of fact, his swearing in was at Parliament Building, and the entire Guyanese public was invited. And everyone, including yourself, sir, has memories of that event with the thousands, hundreds of thousands of Guyanese that were there, and the challenges that presented itself to the security forces simply because everyone wanted to touch and feel the president. In terms of this case, and I'm on page 5 of my submissions, and sir, I should tell you that my submissions aren't going to be more than 4 to 5 minutes.
Not long.
There might be 30 minutes.
Just kidding.
There
I'm
might be.
kidding, Mr. Pieters. Go
Yes,
right ahead.
all right.
Go right ahead.
Y'all know how to get me going. Yeah, so, I mean, if you look, I'm on page 7 of my submissions. And I think the next 3 pages are important, so I'm going to read that in the record. It is our submissions that the head of the Special Organized Crime Unit, Assistant Commissioner Sidney James, acted with due diligence from the time he received the report from Travis Chase of this alleged plot. The evidence shows that the head of the SOCO picked up the incriminating videotape 5 minutes afterwards from the residence of Mr. Chase. Mr. James was Mr. Chase's first point of contact in the Guyana police force in this matter. The reaction of this officer of the Guyana police force is illustrated in the actions he personally took. For one thing, he went himself as opposed to sending one of his subordinate ranks. For another, he went straight away to Mr. Chase's home as opposed to waiting for him to get to his official place of work that morning. But that was not all. Mr. James immediately informed the Commissioner of Police Acting Assistant Commissioner Ramnarai. The acting COP responded by instructing the head of SOCO to meet him in his office mere hours after the client handed over to the Guyana Police Force representative the only video evidence recorded of the plot to assassinate His Excellency. And it was at this point where due diligence began to pale in significance when compared with the actions of Assistant Commissioner James. But my client was not aware of this change of pace that morning, nor could he have had the slightest indication, given the alacrity of Sidney James, of what followed. Understandably, therefore, when my client handed over the tapes to Mr. James, who responded to him with such impressive professionalism, he felt he had done his civil duty to Mr. Gilliard, to himself, and to the country. That is the complexion we say that you must put on Travis Chase's actions as opposed to what Justice Chang said. Because what our submission is based in fact. Our submission has a factual record and a factual basis.